Okay, so I'm going to kick things off and then people can pick things up if they want to as well. So I just want to introduce myself, and I'm going to share my screen as well because I've got a few slides to illustrate my points as well. So my name's Sarah Gane, and I spent a large part of my career working in publishing, so magazine publishing primarily, and creative titles, 3D art, photography, craft, all kinds of things. One of the things that I really love, and I've loved from a child, is magazines. And zines, as we'll find out as we go through this, is really a form of independent publishing, self-publishing, DIY. It largely originated in the sort of 70s, 80s with the punk feminism movement there. And what's great about it is that, yeah, anybody can do it really, as I put in the description. So a little bit more about me, and the reason I'll explain why I'm giving you this information will kind of illustrate further on as well. So part of me is I love listening to punk and hip hop and metal, and largely you'll find these elements within many of the different zines that you'll see out there. Favourite number, any odd numbers. I love geeking out about good magazines, so really high quality print publications, coffee, ceramics, music. And I was actually in junior school when I made my first zine. So I sold it for 20p. It was a double-sided A4 sheet, and that is kind of how I got into it really. And yeah, so an interesting fact about myself, I won a year's supply of Battenberg capes, there you go, and you'll often find me in the pottery studio as well. So these reasons, the reason I'm telling you about these things is really to illustrate that any of these qualities can form a zine. So think about your diverse range of interests, weird kind of obsessions, whether it's your profession, whether it's something that you just absolutely have loved, you know, something you're passionate about it. These can all form your zines. So largely, if you're practicing artists, you could use it as a portfolio piece, but essentially, as I'll go into, zines are basically short for magazines or fanzines. So as I've mentioned, it's DIY, it's indie publishing, it's supposed to be cheap and cheerful. And as you can see from the slides here, it really is about the cut and paste. You know, you could do it digitally, but I think what I really love about this medium is that I think get your hands dirty, actually have a play with paper. This is what is fun about this, is that there is no wrong way. You know, we can run through layouts and everything else, but actually have a feel for things. It's quite intuitive. See how you kind of work with the paper. So often these things are handmade. Like I say, digitally, they can work as well. Using illustrations, whether that's your own, whether that's doodles, whether that's patterns, collages, photos, and all kinds of handwritten or typed text as well. Quite often you'll see poetry, you know, song lyrics, it could be articles, all of that sort of thing. And it's a really respected art form. So like I mentioned, it can be on any subject. So make them reflect you and your interests. And often, like I mentioned, they are cheaply produced, often using photocopiers or Risoprint. And before I go any further, just to let you know as well, that if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function and I'll try and work through those as I go through. So I just want to share some examples. Here we've got some very different examples of zines. So we've got something there on printed, one sec, on newspaper paper here, and that's obviously done using Photoshop or Illustrator. You've got illustrations there, you've got stuff using photos, and again, you've got really, really niche. I mean, the more niche, the better with these things. So whatever it is that you've got in mind and you want to kind of share with the world, that's all good as well. Something that you'll find as you kind of step into this world of zines is that actually people love to share them. You can sell them, you can give them away. So how many, I don't know if, one sec, I'll just stop sharing that. How many people here are practicing artists that just said, yeah, okay. So does anyone want to share kind of how they see the zines working for them in their practice? Yeah. Do you want to unmute? Yeah. Hi, welcome.
Hello there. Well, it's just that I'm taking part in other Zoom group meetings just to stay in touch with other artists. and they're all people I don't know. But a lot of people are using cutting and pasting and, what was that word used? Collage,
Yeah.
which is just something I've not really explored before. So I'm hoping this will sort of expand my tastes a little bit. And also, I wasn't aware of what zines were, and I have seen them a lot, but I wasn't aware that that's what it was I was dealing with. And yes, I do like it as an art form. Yeah.
Fab. Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay, there it goes. Woo!
Here we go. Here, two people.
So,
right, with Danielle first. 1 sec. Sorry.
Sorry, it wasn't unmuting. So I'm old school ziner from the Bay Area, and so like one of my friends is the person that does Doris.
Okay.
So the Berkeley Anarchist Collective had a big zine collection. So when I lived there in my early 20s, I was curious. I jumped in this workshop just to see what the newfangled versions of zines were.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I'll just switch over to Karen. Hi, Karen.
Hi. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. Loud and clear.
No, I was just going to say that I work with sort of project-based artwork, really, to do with people and place. And I just thought zines would be a lovely way of getting people to contribute to one zine. So maybe make a sort of collaborative zine more than sort of me making the zine. And to do.
I love that.
Yeah.
That sounds great. Anybody else? Hi, Rosie.
Hi. Yeah, I do a lot of textile work, but I work within community groups, and we do bookmaking and printing as well. So I thought zines, I mean, I know about zines and I'm really keen, but I've not introduced that as a subject before because we've been doing folded books, which is not that far away from it, and a lot of printing and all that kind of thing. So it's very exciting to join with other artists, really, and talk about what you love. So.
Oh, it's lovely to hear you anyway. Thank you for joining us. Anybody else like to join in? All good? Yeah, so I think exactly like you say, it's very similar to bookmaking. You can get different pamphlet folds. What I'm going to do is just change the, 1 sec, I'm just going to mute. So yeah, so you can basically have lots of different, I don't know if you can see from there. So generally, you can work on the one-page format. So you can literally have, as I've put in the description, one single sheet of A4, and you can create serious magic with this. And we'll go through the folding technique as well. But generally, you can work with whatever size you've got. One thing I would say is if you are planning to photocopy it, keep it to a standard sort of A4, A3 size if you can, just because it makes it a whole lot easier if, rather than kind of faffing at printers. It just gets quite stressful. I don't think I mentioned before, but zines typically are low print runs. So perhaps you could do limited editions. If you're artists and you want to kind of sell those, they are very collectible. And you'll find as you explore this medium, there's a whole world out there and there's a really big market for this kind of thing. People sell on Etsy, and I'll share some other sites as well. And yeah, so I would recommend trying to stick to that, especially in the beginning. But then, for example, one that I've been working on, I just use graph paper, but essentially, you know, I haven't done it as a standard size. I've just worked really with the paper that I had, handwriting a lot of the stuff that I wanted to work with as well. Yeah, something else here. This is on A3, so I've simply just folded it and popped it in. And essentially, you could still run it through a photocopier, so I shouldn't really worry about that. Does anyone have a Riso graph at all? Or Karen?
I don't have one, but there is one at an eco park fairly near me.
Oh, wow. Okay, whereabouts is that?
That's Mount Pleasant, sort of St Austell way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, Riso, if anyone hasn't heard of that before, it's essentially, it looks very similar to a photocopier, but it behaves much like a screen printer. So you get that, the alignment shifts quite often. They can be quite temperamental, but and you can play around with tones, half tones and things as well. So have a look around. Quite often they are found, they're very, very cheap to print. So they're found often in community spaces. I know in the US, I've heard stories of people finding them very, very cheap in sort of church basements and everything else. So if you can print with that, if not, just go down to your local copy shop and or scan them in at home if you have those facilities as well. But essentially, you can print it however you want, black and white, color, but just think about the costs as well. So yeah, it's just something worth thinking about. So I'm just going to share this screen again. 1 second. Can everyone see that okay? Yeah. So as I've run through, for those that have just joined us, looking at the different styles of zines, again, it depends really on your style and your art form. So think about how you could incorporate. Could you work with maybe photos or textured paper or found objects? If you have a local scrap store nearby, could you pick up some interesting bits and bobs there? If you have little hand presses, little hand cutters, I'm trying to think of the word, you can often sort of cut little shapes out. Think about what will kind of come from the offcuts of that perhaps. So it's really about using what you have, and the more limitations in my mind, the better, because you are forced to then kind of see, okay, what can I work with here? So what I want you to do, just as a little fun project, is just grab a paper and pen and just start thinking about these following questions. I'm just going to run through them. So obviously your name, but also think about, right, what's your favourite colour? Don't have to sort of spend too much time on this, but just think whatever springs to mind. And maybe complete the following sentences. So I love wearing. My favourite city is. You'll often find me. An interesting fact about yourself. I wish I could. I'm really into. My favourite number is. And I love geeking out about. Okay, does anyone want to share any of those answers? You don't have to, but. Be brave, guys. Okay.
My name is Karen. Favourite colour, blue. I love wearing green. You'll also find me under a tree. Interesting fact about me, I'm half Armenian. My favourite number is 4. I was born on the 4th of the 4th.
Fab. Thank you, Karen. Danielle?
Favorite city is Oxford. Fifth color, bright. I love wearing bright things. That's about it. Love geeking out about art history.
Art history, cool. Thank you. Anybody else like to join? Hey.
Oh, I've got some similar answers. Snap with some people. Favourite colour, blue. There was a question about what you like wearing.
Yeah.
My daughter's t-shirts. Favourite city, Oxford. You'll find me in the woods. I lived in Japan as a child. I would like to go. What do you like to do?
I'm really into, or
Oh, I'm really into horses and dogs and cats. I'd like to go to Italy. favourite number, the age I am, and what was the last question? I've put the answer as common land.
I love geeking out about
Common land.
Yeah. Okay, great. They're great answers. Thank you. So the reason I was kind of getting you to think about this is that they are all essentially creative prompts. So thinking about, maybe your childhood in Japan, was there anything particular that you really loved or you really remember about that experience? And that in itself could form a zine. And thinking about your favourite numbers. So it could be maybe you're drawing groups of 4 things, or perhaps it's a map, an illustrated map of Oxford, or all of your favourite cafes within that, a certain area of Oxford. So it's really thinking you don't have to kind of, really reinvent the wheel in this. It's meant to reflect you, obviously, unless you're doing it as a part of a community project, in which case it'll be a kind of variety of different things. But I think if ever you're stuck for ideas, these can be quite helpful. And I think just having a play with those things and seeing what comes up, really. And like I say, the more niche, the better. If somebody mentioned about wearing their daughter's t-shirts, perhaps you could illustrate those, all the different t-shirts you love to wear. Where are they from? Kate Bingham-Burke is an illustrator. She's based in, I think it's San Francisco, and she draws every day a list of her purchases. And she calls it obsessive consumption. So check out her project. And it started out, I think she's been doing it about a decade, and she's made zines and all kinds of things from this. And so what may seem as a sort of, oh, well, this is just an interesting thing about me, how could that form into content? Actually, you could expand on that idea without too much thought, and just see where it leads, really. So I'm just going to switch back to some of the slides. So just to kind of carry on with the zine prompts here. So really, if you're kind of looking to expand on those ideas beyond those questions, it could be anything from sort of poetry, if you're a writer, or perhaps even if you're not, thinking about song lyrics that you love. One of mine that I showed, the one with the cassette on the front, was songs that I like, and it can just be a compilation of those things. And really, these zines, for me anyway, they're just for myself. They're fun, and that's kind of how I wind down in the evenings, is to make these sorts of things, but it doesn't have to be. And quite often, if you want to make a really strong political statement or something relating to a cause that you feel passionate about, these can be a great outlet, because you're not constrained by anybody's editorial standards, by anybody's kind of advertising revenue. This is your platform, in much the same way as a blog or something like that. But actually, I think there's something really tactile about print. Having that piece of paper in your hand, flicking through something that really is quite personal, I think is an important art form, and something that is very, very accessible to everybody. So other prompts that you might want to consider, think about facts, maybe. You talked, I think it was Karen, talked about being half Armenian. Is there something that you could kind of expand upon with that, perhaps certain facts about the culture, or and things that you can draw? So somebody talked about textile designs. There could be something there in, I don't know, is it quilts in the background? Is it Rosie? Yeah. So that sort of thing, sketching out designs, or perhaps it's interviews with interesting friends that you've got. So things that you can draw, why I really love. So again, thinking about passions. And the reason that I think it can be so important is that you're spending largely your time on these projects. You need to make sure they're enjoyable. And also, I think the passions come through in your work, often, especially you're creative people. So when you're kind of in the mix and in the flow of it, you just get to work with stuff. It just feels easy. And that's the point of it, is that, just kind of see where it leads, experiment. Other prompts, so reasons for avoiding, that could be things that you've learned perhaps in either life, creative practice. Perhaps there's a great series of zines from, I think she's a psychologist, and I'll share the links at the end. She sells her stuff through Microcosm Publishing in the States. Faith G. Harper, I think her name is, and she does these 5-minute therapy series, and it can be on anything from relationships to raising kids. And it goes from being quite a highbrow topic to actually very accessible, very digestible, and they're very affordable. So they're often like sort of $5 or something to buy that sort of stuff. Other things you can include, hopes, dreams, observations, all of that sort of stuff, things that make me laugh. So yeah, there's lots of scope there for content. So when you've got all those ideas, obviously you've got to narrow it down. So think about one that you could really expand upon and one that you could explore. You don't want to make life difficult for yourself. So keep it simple in that sense. So choose one idea, whether it's something from your list already, and think about how you could lay that out. So I talked before about the paper sizes, and everything can vary. You get to dictate this, but there are a few things that might prove helpful for you guys. So I've just done a flat plan, and flat plan is essentially just a series of grids laying out the pages there and just seeing a bird's eye view of what your zine might look like. So thinking really in terms from the reader's perspective, I guess a few tips that I've kind of picked up in magazine publishing, things to keep in mind, is that your cover, it should have impact. So thinking about the name of it, will it be part of a series or is it a one-off perhaps? Communicating that, so things like prices, maybe it's an issue number, maybe it's an edition number, all of those things, as well as an Instagram handle and a web link, are all really, really important. When you're planning out the flat plan, think about pace and flow. So this is something that whether you're doing a zine or whether you're doing a national magazine, you need to think about the flow of the pages and how your reader's going to journey through that message. So what is it that you want to say about the t-shirts you love to wear, perhaps? Are you going to have, you know, kind of an intro at the start, perhaps explaining what it is about those t-shirts you love? And why you choose to wear them, before you then launch into maybe some illustrations, or maybe it's a photo collage of these t-shirts. Think about ways that you can get your information across to people as well. So points of entry, things like annotations maybe around your illustrations or around the photos. Think about patterns. So incorporating other elements. Just because you're an artist, like a writer, doesn't mean you can't then do sketches, illustrations, doodles, layering up things as well. Some of the best scenes often layer up stuff to great effect, and just again keep it fun. That's the most important thing. So if you're going to photocopy, think about your mark making. These lines need to be bold. Photocopying is quite an unforgiving medium, so you need to think about how are people going to read this. So if you're using pencils and bits and bobs like that, just make sure that things are clear and the fold lines are visible maybe as well, just to help yourself out when you get around to folding and things. Again, play with layout. So I'm just gonna stop that share for a minute. Just want to share. Where is it? There we go. So this is one of the zines that I'm playing around with at the moment, called Stuff and Junk. It's just something that I started by setting myself a challenge of using, you know, the free magazines that you get with supermarkets. I just had one of the newspapers and one of the glossier magazines that they give away for free. And I just thought, do you know what, I'm going to see what I can make with it. And so the cover, obviously, think about the name, think about the lettering. So are you going to write that yourself? Are you going to type it? Are you going to then use elements from whatever it is that you're sourcing your material from? I was quite lucky in this sense. It was quite interesting, restrictions with, because it was a food magazine of this particular edition, it was quite tricky because it then kind of limits you again of like, okay, how am I going to work with this stuff? You know, what can I do with it? And it's then about forming patterns from bits that you find wherever it's titles, adverts, and then having a play with those on the page. And then I've added my own patterns around it as well. I'm just going to stop showing that and show you something else. Right. There we go. So just to continue, so with this one here, I've used a combination of different things here. So I don't know if you can see. I've actually used tracing paper as a really good thing to kind of work around. So how I approached this was essentially layering up stuff, but obviously put that down first and then laying the tracing paper over it and just doing some sort of creative cutting around that and some mark making. The same with this. So just thinking about all the different elements. So I've got kind of grid paper, any sort of scraps that you've got are often really, if you can see those bits as well. And just have a play. So thinking about the layout here, how are people going to read this? What's the entry point into the page? So with this, thinking about kind of, obviously people need to be able to read it in some respects, but you could use a typewriter, you could use printed text, you could even kind of cut bits out as well. So that's one of them. This one is a slightly smaller one, made from A5, so it's A4 folded. This is just, it's called Not to Scale. So I have a letterpress tray that I fill with different treasures, and I've just kind of literally just drawn various different bits within that and stuck them on as well. So again, it doesn't have to be anything super complicated, but it can be right under your nose, whatever it is that you sort of feel passionate about it. Has anyone got any ideas of where they might head with this so far? Hey, Danielle.
Yeah, I'm listening to you talk, and I'm thinking I want to do something about being an expat. Just because this is my second, I lived in New Zealand before I lived here, and I feel like every time I meet somebody, they go, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Do you want the long version or the short version?" So I think doing it in a zine format might be a really good place. So I don't know if I just like hand my zine, but yeah, I think that's kind of what I'm jotting down.
I think it's a great idea, and it's also, it could be something that maybe you put online. You know, if you have a blog after that, do it as well. There's a site, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it, called Issue, which is spelled ISSW, and it's a free platform. I know they do paid for elements to it, but essentially you could put it up for that, or like you say, to help fellow expats, and also just as an element of storytelling. That's kind of one thing I'm really passionate about in all my work is, you know, everyone's got a story, everyone's got an interesting tale to tell. So I think that's a really good idea. And I could kind of see a concertina style approach with that. But you mentioned about how things have evolved, and I think with zines, it's constantly evolving, but also it's always the same in some respects. And I think there are some elements that, if you go back to some of the amazing feminist zines of the sort of early 90s, not a lot has really changed, especially, I mean, most of the fashion's kind of 90s now anyway, but yeah, I think that's a great idea. Anybody else? Hey, Rosie? Oh, we can't hear you.
I just wanted to add to that, because I do work with older people in care homes, or I did before all of COVID-19, as an artist. And one of the projects I did, not with a zine, but with a concertina book, was doing a thing called personal maps, where older people don't often tell their story. You know, people just look at them where they're at there, and they just look like, from the outside, an older person. But when you get talking to people, they have amazing life stories and places they've lived and journeys they've done and jobs they've done. And so, just for one example, with an older lady, she'd lived all over the place because she was a dentist, and she trained to be a dentist after the Second World War. So then it was the beginning of the NHS and all of that thing. So when we actually got atlases out and started cutting them up and putting bits of maps in, she had the most amazing journey. So, you know, with Danielle, thinking about that, you know, it's fascinating for other people to know your story and how you came to be where you were and your experiences. I mean, we all love stories. That's why I love making books so much and encouraging other people to do it. And zines seem like a very accessible, exciting way to do that with people of all ages. So yeah, go for it, Danielle. It sounds great.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that's a really lovely way. Like you say, I mean, my mother-in-law works with dementia patients, and you know, kind of, you obviously, she doesn't go into great detail, but just in general sense, talking about maybe they were architects, and it's like you say, they're not kind of just two-dimensional, one-dimensional. It's thinking about what was their story. And something that I'm working on at the moment is a project about the women in my family, because often, you know, we kind of come into, and you know them as auntie or nan or whatever, but actually dig a little deeper, and everybody has a story to tell, and they're not just their job title. I mean, quite often, if you come from, as I did, from a working class background, you know, it'll be a job title of scullery maid, you know, you look on a census, or it could be housewife, and as we all know, they don't make that person. And so what I've decided to do, and I'm not really too sure how it's going to kind of evolve, but I just basically sent a list of questions to my relatives, and asked them some fun questions. I said, you know, it isn't a family tree. Asking them their favourite recipe, or what did they want to be when they were little, or those sorts of things that often they get forgotten, and those bigger stories kind of dominate. But actually it's the little, as you know from the storytelling, it's the little details that make up those people. And so I think absolutely a zine is a great way of doing that. And I love the idea of cutting up the maps and stuff as well. So that's fab. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share? Is it Helen? I don't. Be brave, Helen.
I
was sure that. Hi.
Oh, I did. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'd like to do like a little guide for myself, like a little mental health first aid guide, so that I can, in one little place, I've got all the things that can help me in the moment that I can't remember in the moment. So I'd like to do that.
Oh my God, that is amazing. Can you imagine like leaving that at certain points, you know, across town, or in a library or something like that, and that being able to help somebody else? I just think that's fab. That's a really nice idea. Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share? Hey, Karen. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, I'm just going to add to that really, because I made, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I made a little zine about a character that I made up called Lockdown Lily, sort of during lockdown, and all the things that she did, which was really what I was doing. And then it started to include things that my friends were doing as well, like baking sourdough and getting overrun with the mix and things like that. So that was sort of quite therapeutic actually, but it, like you said, it can help other people as well, because it's bringing humour into it as well.
I really love that idea. It's very Grace and Perry, actually. That's kind of what it reminds me of there. That's really cool. And I think as well, something I didn't mention, that in the styles of zines, so obviously you've got your collage and everything else, comics, graphic novels are, you know, they're very respected in the zine world. So I think that's a really interesting one. And I'm sure you could even do it as a series, couldn't you? You can imagine what she's doing kind of month 3 in lockdown. Oh my God, you know. So I think you can have some fun with that, definitely. That's great. Sorry, Claire, you were next. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that along that same sort of line, really, I would quite like to do a zine which based on things that I've learnt out of lockdown, which is really positive, because I feel that I haven't, you know, up until this moment, I'm working, I've got loads of things to do. They're not unpleasant things, but there's so much, and I think this has given some breathing space, and I don't want to forget the things that have become quite precious, you know, small things, small nature and walks and cycling and baking a cake, you know, all that sort of stuff.
I think that's a great idea. There's something I started doing a couple of days ago for my daughter. I've got a 3-year-old, and I thought this is quite a unique moment for a kid's life, you know, whether she'll remember it, I don't know, but just having like you say, those little moments of what you've got up to, perhaps little snippets of conversation, it could be photos. I think, yeah, absolutely. It's that sort of stuff when you look back on it, and quite often it can be like, oh God, you know, it was a really stressful time, and it no doubt is for a lot of people, but there were a lot of moments, like you say, where people, and a lot of people, especially creative people I've spoken to, where they just say it was kind of like an enforced break, you know, and it's that period of reflection, and maybe it's things like a bit of a pivot in terms of career, or they're thinking about exploring new things, and how nice to have an almost time capsule of that. I think it's a fab idea. Thank you for sharing, Claire. Anybody else?
Good.
Hi.
Hi. I just listened to you. I didn't have any ideas before, and I quite like the idea of cutting maps.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, we didn't know about the lockdown, but luckily earlier this year we did in January an interrail trip. So we started from here and we went all the way to the other end of Europe. And I still have a pile of all sorts, and I've been meaning to do something with it, but I haven't. So this is more manageable. Maybe I can do something for each place where we stopped or something like that.
Thank you for sharing. That's a great idea. One thing that I found, I've never really done much scrapbooking, and I found quite often, I don't know if anyone else has found the same thing, it takes up quite a bit of space. Like when you have those books full of, like you were saying, Lilia, like tickets and maps and bits like that. And I think the great thing about having a zine is that you could photocopy that and it will be, one, a lot thinner, or you could even do it digitally. So then you have all of that stuff, but yet you don't have to house it all, unless you have the space for that. But I love printed things, so I'd end up like needing a house the size of, I don't know, a mansion or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else before I move? No? Okay, fab, right. So let me just find these bits here. Sorry, bear with me one sec. So I just want to jump back to the flat plan, just to run through that with you guys. So yeah, thinking about, I mean, I can share a template, maybe speak to Beth actually about hosting something on the site afterwards if it would be helpful for you guys, but just thinking about it in a grid sort of format. So obviously your front cover will always be the front cover, and the outside back cover, that's something where you could maybe put web links, or if you've got an Instagram handle or email address, that type of thing as well. But the rest of the pages, it's free to whatever you want to do. I mean, if you want to up the pagination, I would that's a number of pages. I would recommend maybe having page numbers or contents page if you want that type of thing, or if you want it quite free flowing, you don't have to restrict yourself, but just thinking about it in this sense, just, okay, what's going to go on each page before you start cutting and getting a bit overwhelmed can often be a really good approach. So just thinking about, maybe it's 1 or 2 words of just like, okay, this is going to be, so someone, Lilia, I think it was you mentioned the Interrail journey. So perhaps you would chart it out with the countries, or maybe you'd have a little introduction as to why you ventured onto this trip in the first place. So it's just about thinking about, again, the pacing and the flow of it. So balance your text with imagery. So there's no reason you can't have text only, but just think about the reader's experience as well. So think about the format, the size of it. If it's going to be for older people, like Rosie was talking about, or was it Rod, sorry, about having the size of the copy, if it's going to be for different audiences. So just making sure that those are considered, really. And again, playing with the layout. So what I want to do now is just run through how to make a one-page zine. It's super simple. And does anyone have any sort of piece of paper, like an A4 sheet or something, or just, yeah, people came prepared, I love it. I'll just give everyone a few minutes just to grab your supplies. So have you got a pair of scissors as well to hand? You guys are great, awesome. So I'm going to do an A4 because that's, I think, is the most accessible for everybody, and it's the cheap copy of paper. The cheaper the better, in my opinion. So I'll use my blank sheets. They're all starting from the same thing. So what I want you to do is to fold it in half, that way. And just give me a shout if you get stuck. So I've just noticed some chat messages. I'm just going to check those. Yes, Karen, Riso is eco soy-based ink, and yeah, amazing. I didn't realise the stencils were seaweed, so that's really interesting. The zine artist is Kate Bingaman So I'll just put, and it was obsessive consumption, I think, project with that. And the tracing paper, just to sort of, before I move on with the one-page zine, all I did was basically, I worked with the layout of use the elements, the shapes first, glued them down, and then just laid the tracing paper over the top, made my marks, and then literally just cut it out and stuck it there. Just because I wanted to work around the image that I had, really. I mean, you could obviously do the pattern first if you don't have tracing paper, that's fine. But I quite like the layered look. And also, a lot of the stuff, although I do plan a flat plan, it's not, you don't have to, it's not rigid. And I think often when you're rummaging through a newspaper or magazine, you could be seeing elements that you think, oh, that's a really nice ampersand, or that's a really nice whatever. So that's kind of how I use that there. So I'm just going to close that down, but feel free if you've got any other questions to pop them in there. So yeah, so just to go back to this, so you folded it like that. I'd like you to fold it again. You've got there, and fold it in half again. You should have a tiny, tiny little book like this. Just want to check everyone else's. So what I want you to do is, once you've got your, it should be 8 squares, should look like that, fold it in half, sort of lengthways like that, and I want you to cut from here to here. It should look like this. Karen, you've got it? Great. And then I want you to, from there, you should have it so that it pushes together. So I want you to lay that there. Looking good, Helen? Karen, yeah. Yeah. Is it Adelisa? Yeah, so fold it over there and push them. That's it, so they go out. Yeah. Then you have your little template there. Again, it's really that simple. So thinking about what is going to be on your cover, and you can even do it as a design so that you can maybe have something bigger on the other side. Perhaps if you want to illustrate something like an A4 piece. Obviously, this format, this size does have restrictions in that if you are working with some of the found images, you know, kind of in publications a bit like this, you are going to be restricted. But the great thing about it is that it's achievable. You know, you're not, if you were to say, set yourself an hour to work on a zine like this, you could produce something. And that is kind of where I'm going with it. I think start off small, see where you go, see where it leads. And I think then you can get it done, you can photocopy it, and it can be relatively cheap and get it out there. Does anyone have any thoughts so far on what I've shared? All pretty much there, okay. So one sec. So something else I wanted to just cover, and I don't know if this is something that may be helpful, but it's something, a technique that is kind of following on quite nicely with the zines, and that is about using found objects, so pre-written text in your magazines, in your junk mail, and cutting that up. And this is one of the ways I thought with content, you can then form something new. And so this idea, it was, if you look up how to write Dadaist poem, you'll see it's the cut up, and it's called the cut up method. So I wrote an article about this for a creative magazine, and what I really loved about it, and I don't know if anyone here is a David Bowie fan, but it's something that he did, and more recent artists as well, like Tom York from Radiohead, do it as well. And so basically, you're cutting up words, maybe a chunk of text from a newspaper, and you're forming something new. Maybe it's a poem, maybe it's a paragraph of text, whatever. Just see what comes from it. And I've done it myself a few times, and actually you get some pretty good results. Has anybody else tried it before? Helen? Yeah?
Yeah, I used some journaling. I did just journaling on one topic, and then chopped it up, and it made a really brilliant poem. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. Hey, Danielle.
There it goes. Yeah, there's the found poetry, where you take a text from a book and then you draw around only certain words, and you block out everything else, so you make the poem within the text of the book that's already there. And that's really fascinating, and you can also get really beautiful images depending on what you're circling and drawing around.
That is, yeah, that's actually, I wonder, I did, so let me see if I can find it. I love that though, because I think as a zine, what an amazing concept to have that as, you know, some of your content there. And just,
right.
I mean, I'm talking the free magazines that you find in a supermarket, it could be the junk mail through your door. How amazing to turn something that is very mundane into something that is beautiful as well. So yeah, I really love that. And it's something that, I'm just trying to find a picture of it. Sorry, bear with me a sec. Is this what you mean, Danielle?
Yes, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually the ones I've seen though, people really do a lot of art around them. And it's a great project also to do with kids, especially like if a library is getting rid of books, or there's, you know, old books that are falling apart. Just something about working on that texture of that old paper. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's brilliant. And yeah, I think definitely whether you're putting photos in or anything like that, I think, and that's actually the next thing on there, is customizing the content. So whether you've got a photo and you don't want to be too precious about it, photocopy that and then work on that and cut them up, because I think you get some really interesting results. I did have an example, I think. It has got swears, so I'll only just flash it up for a second so you can't read the text too much. That's the thing with zines, everyone's a law unto themselves. So yeah, this punk zine here, I don't know if you can see that one, just playing around with the layout and the text. I really love that. And so don't feel constrained by whatever you put there that you can't, you have to be precious about it. You know, have a play, experiment. I think it'd be really cool. Has anybody else tried the cut and, I can't even think what the cut up method, sorry. Has anyone tried that? So yeah, essentially just doing things at random, customizing things. Has anybody got any questions? I'm just going to run through, one sec. Danielle, sorry, you wanted to know where I cut. Sorry. So if you've got your piece of paper like this, and then you cut from here to here.
Okay.
And then you push it like this.
Yeah. All right. I thought there was some other trick in there, but that's what I did.
It really is that simple. So, so yeah. Has anybody else got any? I'm just seeing here. Oh, the blackout poems. Oh, okay, Austin. That sounds great. And Tom Phillips is an artist who did this and made a book called The Human. That sounds amazing. I'm going to check that out. Is anyone else familiar with any artists that use that sort of stuff? but that's what I mean. And it kind of goes back to, again, you have the power to make this your own. And I would encourage you, even if it's not for a zine, especially with the kind of playing with the photos and stuff like that in your journal, whatever it is, to have a play and explore. Has anyone else got any questions about layout? No? Okay. Cool. Okay, well, I think that's it from me, unless anybody else has anything they'd like to add. Thank you so much for joining. Would it be helpful, before I go, would it be helpful to share the slides or any of the links? Does anyone need any of the information that I ran through? Yes, okay, lovely. So actually, sorry, I nearly finished without finishing my last slide. Silly. There we go, right. So just talk through some of the zine resources. Microcosm is a great indie publisher. So they're based in the States. I think they're based in Portland. And they have an amazing just stash of stuff there. But also, I think if you are planning on selling your zines, you could get in touch with them. They're super friendly, and they could even be a platform for you to sell them through as well. And just to help with advice, you know, kind of, I don't know, really distribution or issuing, pricing, that type of thing can always be quite handy. Another site called Printed Matter. Now they've just this kind of last week launched an appeal for people to get in touch if they've got any material relating to the Black Lives Matter causes, and they're going to upload and host all of that on their site as well, which is amazing. And again, they've got some brilliant resources on there. Oh, something I wanted to talk about as well is a site called Newspaper Club. Has anybody heard of that before? So this is really cool. So Newspaper Club are a printing press. They print everything on newspaper sheets. So obviously it's not meant to be, it's not like archival paper or anything like that, but it's a super cheap way of getting your message out there. And you can do it as a standard newspaper size. You can do it as a booklet size. And there's tons of people there. The print runs don't have to be massive, so it's very affordable. And you can even sell through their site as well. So you could either just get it delivered and hand it out for free, or whatever it is you want to do. Then archive.org is another really good site. If you search for zines on there, you'll find stuff. I think they acquired things, I don't know, I'm sure it was about 20 years ago, just massive back catalogue of things, a lot of feminism stuff, and, you know, kind of very niche, just subjects, just everything, all manner of things. You can literally, whatever your interests are, I'm pretty sure you can find a zine on it. And if not, then maybe you can make one as well. So there's also Girl Zine, Stolen Sharpie Revolution. And the Creative Independent is a really nice resource if you are working artists anyway. But I think it's just a nice site there. They've got a few digital zines on there. There's the Broken Pencil, just brokenpencil.com, Zine Book, and QZap is a collection, an archive of zines relating to people who identify as queer. So it's, again, it spans over years, and that's the great thing, is that everybody can use this as a platform to get their voice out there and to educate people. There's another site which is UK called penfightdistro.com, and I think they're based in Manchester, and they quite often host events. So again, if you're thinking of selling your zine and getting it out there, then they could be a really good one to shout. But failing that, go on Etsy, have a look, explore. And something that, what I love about the zine community is a lot about shares, trades. Quite often, if you guys all in the group were going to make one, sharing them with each other and just reading what everyone's got to say is a really lovely part, and it's just a wonderful community. So something that I think everybody can be welcomed into. And yes, York Zine Fest, again, probably not many events running at this time, but things to keep an eye out for, and especially if you do want to share your work and sell your work, they could be places to kind of get a little stand, get a little stall going along with your other stuff. It could be a great cross promotion tool. I'm just going to check the chat here. Oh, thank you for the kind comments. I'm really pleased that people have found it inspiring. And yeah, no worries, Beth. I'll send you the slides so everyone's got that if you want to share, if it's helpful for you guys. And don't worry, Karen, don't worry about being late. It's fine. Lovely. Thank you so much for everybody for coming in and sharing your afternoon with me. Anyway, I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to see how everyone does with the zine, so I shall be keeping an eye out. But yeah, feel free to follow me on Instagram and show me what you're making. And yeah, I wish you all the best. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.